This is a beautiful piece of instrument.
Our eyes are closed when we start this loop on repeat. Hear my chest, how it beats when you put your hands on me. Time goes fast, but yet so slow. I leave all thoughts, yeah, I let them go. 'Cause I'm here with you, and all I need is you. It's so easy to be us. We lock ourselves out from the world, we're lost. It's so easy to be us. We lock ourselves out from the world, we're lost. Don't know what you really feel, but I really like this dream. Don't need to feel anything but you floating in my bloodstream. Time goes fast, but yet so slow. I leave all thoughts, yeah, I let them go. 'Cause I'm here with you, and all I need is you. It's so easy to be us. We lock ourselves out from the world, we're lost. It's so easy to be us. We lock ourselves out from the world, we're lost. Lost in each other. Lost in each other. Lost in each other. I'm so lost in
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and in this video I'm going to talk about my experiences with this amazing iOptron CEM70EC-NUC. That is a long name, but there is a reason why this mount has as long of a name as it does. And before I go on, I want to thank Astro for sending out this mount to me for review. Really like working with you guys, and I hope that we can do this more. So I hope that in this video I can help answer what this mount is it's really good for and who is it for. Well, I can tell you one thing, that in my brief time with it, I can say that this mount is for somebody who is looking to pair a larger telescope with it. Obviously, with the 70-pound capacity, you can actually fit a large telescope on top of this. And I'll also say that this is for somebody who wants a more substantial, sort of more permanent mount. I wouldn't recommend this for a total beginner. And I'll go on why that is and later on in this video. And finally, I think this is a mount for somebody who is interested in the CEM design. That is short for Center Balance Equatorial mount. And it is a slight deviation from the typical German equatorial mount that you see most people would use. If you follow me around in my videos, you know that I don't dwell on the specs, because frankly, you don't need me to read numbers off to you guys. You guys can go on the internet and read the numbers all you want. So instead, what I like to focus on in my videos is, my overall impression, the user experience, any weird things that pop up as I use it. So with that being said, I'm gonna quickly glance over the basic specs for this mount. And then I'm gonna talk about what I think of it. So obviously, as the name suggests, this CEM70 is capable of handling 70 pounds of payload. That is the maximum weight that it is advertised to handle. And that's really good enough for, this will handle a 5-inch, 130 millimeter refractor easily. I'm pretty sure you can even throw in a 6-inch, 150 millimeter refractor onto it. It should be no problem. Now, the weight of the mount head itself is 30 pounds or about 14 kilograms. So, a 30 pounds mount that can handle up to 70 pounds of payload, that's pretty amazing, if you ask me. Now, this has iPolar to help you with polar alignment. More on that later. I don't like it. I don't think it helps you. I don't use it. Now, obviously, the main selling point of this iOptron is the CEM, or Center Balance Equatorial Mount design, which I will go on more in detail later on in this video. And this model also has the right ascension encoder. And also, being the top of the line model that it is, it also has provision to accept an Intel NUC mini PC. And now that I've got all the specs out of the way, I can move on to actually what I think of the mount. Okay, now that the specs are out of the way, I can actually talk to you about what it's like to handle the mount. Now, obviously, if you've used an Equatorial mount before, you are obviously familiar with clutches to lock and unlock your declination and your RA axis, which I will go into in a little bit. But the iOptron CEM70 uses a different design. It uses a gear-based clutch, a gear-based lock. So what that means is that there's actually a gear within the axis that will only allow for example, in this example, your declination to lock in certain positions. Because there's a physical gear within the axis that will engage or disengage. I mean, if I bring my mic closer, you can hear the gear. Now, it's not gonna damage it the way that I'm doing this. I'm just demonstrating you that there is a gear underneath that will lock and unlock and then lock again only in certain positions. I actually prefer this over the typical clutch space where you just sort of like squeeze the mechanism together until it locks. This is more secure, in my opinion. Now, in the RA axis, it's the same design with the gear-based lock. However, there's a secondary physical lock in case you forget everything else. So iOptron supplies you with this hex key. Hopefully you guys can see yeah. And you're actually going to be using this to attach the mount head onto the tripod that you'll be using. But also, this is sort of a clever design. This acts as a secondary physical lock for your RA. It goes back into this hole right here, if I can find it. Okay. And let's just say that I've unlocked the mount and I forgot to lock it. That hex key will act as a secondary physical lock. So if I pull it out, it'll be free. And all I need to do is just make sure I lock it again. So I think that's a really good design, sort of a good fail-safe. Now, the saddle plate that this comes with, it is designed to accept both fixin style, which is sort of the narrower dovetails that you see on a lot of telescope, but it is also ready to accept the wider lost many style dovetail. And I think that's super awesome because my other mount, my iOptron. Okay, apparently I'm just making words up now in this video. I am on fire. iOptron does not exist. I meant to say my Skywatcher HEQ5 mount came with a fixed and style saddle plate, and I actually had to upgrade it from a third party to accept both fixed and style and I lost many style dovetail plates. So it's really good that iOptron already include that for you. Another nice design that's really good for the user, especially when you're polar aligning, is that the altitude, I don't know if I'm, yeah, it's like around here, hopefully I'm feeling it. The altitude markings and the azimuth marking are clearly defined. And it's a small thing, but when you can see just how much you're moving your altitude and your azimuth adjustment when you're doing polar alignment, it is such a big help. I know a lot of mounts, they have markings for the altitude, but most mounts, to my knowledge, they don't have a marking for the azimuth. So the fact that you can see exactly how much you're moving your left and right azimuth adjustment, it helps a lot during polar alignment. So thank you, iOptron, for including that. I'm just gonna put this thing back before I lose it. Yeah. Now that we've gone over some of the basic specs and some of the basic features of this mount, those are features that you will find on any Equatorial mount. I want to talk about what makes this iOptron CEM70EC-NUC stands out from the competition. Now, all of its advanced features and what makes it unique is already in the name. I've covered the 70 portion because this has a payload capacity of 70 pounds. Now I want to talk about the EC portion of the name. EC stands for encoder, and this mount has an encoder at the right ascension axis. And iOptron on the spec sheet says that at the right ascension, this has a periodic error of 0.3 arc second and below. How does it achieve that? Before I go into that, I want to make sure that I tell people I am not an expert in how encoders work. Actually, I've only started learning about encoders when I got the mount. So I'm still learning, so if there are experts out there watching, please feel free to correct me and post in the comments about your knowledge on encoders, because I'm learning, so let's help everybody else learn as well. But from what I can gather, an encoder basically reads the internal gear of the axis that it is on. In this example, only the RA axis. Remember, only the right ascension axis has the encoder, and is able to read basically between the gear teeth, I want to say, whether or not the gears are moving too fast or too slow, which leads to periodic error. And it's able to send out adjustment to either slow down or speed up the gear so that your periodic error stays below, as iOptron would say, below 0.3 arc second. And yeah, I believe it. I mean, I've gotten really good auto-guiding results using this mount. It's definitely better than my iOptron. Maybe somebody out there will create a company called iOptron, and I'm just thinking about it well ahead of time. But this mount actually definitely tracks way better than my Skywatcher HEQ5, and it's able to track much better with a much heavier payload. So yeah, I'm quite impressed by the tracking ability of the iOptron CEM70EC-NUC. I'm gonna move down the name of this mount. Now that I've covered the 70, the EC, now I'm gonna cover the NUC part of the name. The NUC stands for Intel's own NUC mini computer. And there is on my version at the very least, this provision is not on every single iOptron mount. You have to make sure that you pick and choose the NUC model. It has provisions to accept and have you mount a Intel NUC mini PC onto the mount head itself. Well, why would you want to do that, right? I can think of one very obvious reason, and that is because when you mount a mini PC directly onto your mount, you're cutting off so much cable length that it makes cable management so much easier. And when you have less cable dragging or just hanging off your mount, you're almost always going to have better guiding, better tracking. Now, I want to stress a couple of things. Number one, for most Intel NUC mini computers, they come in two versions. And they're really distinguished by the physical size. There's going to be a thicker one and there's going to be a slimmer one. Make sure that you get the slimmer version of the Intel NUC. Otherwise, it will not fit in there. The normal version of Intel NUC is too thick to be fitted onto the mount. So just beware of that. And secondly, the provisions up here, it's only designed to pair with an Intel NUC chassis. So while you can use other laptops, and also you can definitely use other mini computers with this iOptron mount, only the slim version of the Intel NUC will mount onto your iOptron NUC capable mount. I'm a floating head. Yeah, I'm a weirdo. Never mind me, but let's talk about the CEM portion of the name. I've gone over why it's a 70, because it can carry a payload of 70 pounds. The EC, which stands for the encoder at the RA axis. The NUC, which stands for it being capable to mount an Intel NUC mini PC. Now, what about the beginning of the name? CEM. CEM stands for Center Balanced Equatorial Mount. Before I go on, let's talk about a traditional German equatorial mount. The way that a German equatorial mount is designed is so that the mass of the counterweight, along with the mass of the telescope, it's always sort of in front of the mount because of the way that the telescope saddle is designed. The telescope saddle for a German equatorial mount, it's always going to be sort of like in front of the mount. So combine that with the weight of your counterweight, which is also placed in front of the mount. Therefore, the center of mass between your telescope and your German and your counterweight for a German equatorial mount, it's always going to be in front of your mount. If you can draw an imaginary straight line down here, this is where the center of mass between your telescope and your counterweight for German equatorial mount would be. Now, what about a center balanced equatorial mount? Well, as you can see, some people will even call this the Z mount because of this Z-like configuration between the telescope and your counterweight. And the whole theory is that if you place your telescope sort of behind the mount, so therefore the mass of the telescope is sort of behind the mount, and you leave the mass of the counterweight still like a traditional German equatorial mount in front of the mount, therefore these two weights should balance themselves out when everything is balanced, of course. And therefore, the center of mass between your telescope and your counterweight would actually be in the middle of the mount. That is why they call this a CEM, or a center balanced equatorial mount. And I just like this design a whole lot better because I think it does lead to better tracking. I think it does lead to better auto guiding capability, whether or not you have the encoder. And I just like the idea that, you know, your center of mass between the telescope and the counterweight is not always permanently in front of your mount, but instead in the center balance equatorial mount, your center of mass is always in the middle of your mount head because of the way that your telescope and your counterweight is configured in this sort of Z configuration. It's gonna be a good night tonight. I'm really looking forward to using the iOptron CEM70 to take my next picture. You know, now I want to take an opportunity to actually show you how to set up the mount. Okay, so as I said, this mount's about 30 pounds, and for its capability, I really think that's really good. I mean, 30 pounds for 70 pounds of payload, that's really good. But I also want to stress that no mount will ever be perfect. And this is sort of the area that I kind of dislike about this mount is setting up, because you remember I mentioned this hex key earlier? Now this is just a normal, I think this is like a 6mm hex key. If you lose it, don't worry, it's not the end of the world. You can use any 6mm or maybe even 5mm. You just have to figure out what it is. I forgot. But it's a normal hex key. You're gonna be using this to secure your mount head to your tripod. You're also gonna be using this to unlock your altitude adjustment lock. And actually, if you have really small fingers, then you can rotate the altitude adjustment knob. But if you have, I guess, fatter fingers, luckily iOptron has designed the knob to accept a hex key to move it around. Otherwise, you're going to be pinching your fingers, trying to get your finger into this altitude adjustment knob. So yeah, make sure you have this hex key or something equivalent at the ready. Another thing I want to mention is that the way that the mount is secured onto your tripod, it's a really good connection, but getting it secure can be kind of annoying. There are these bolts in here that are designed to bolt up to your tripod. The problem is that the mount actually hides the holes for the bolts. The holes are on your tripod. So what you have to do is sort of, you know, kind of blindly feel it out where the hole is. And once you find that, then you can obviously use your hex key to secure it. But that's another sort of annoyance in itself, because I call this the IKEA problem. I don't know if you guys ever built an IKEA furniture, but IKEA always has like these bolts and holes located in a spot where there's no room for you to actually make any like meaningful turns. So and they give you a hex key just as well, right? So in order for you to tighten up your IKEA furniture, you kind of have to like rotate it, take it out, put it back in, rotate it, take it out, put it back in. And it's similar case here, which can be kind of frustrating, especially for people living in colder climates where, you know, when it's cold, your fingers are basically crushed. And you know, gloves are, you can always wear gloves, but it's hard to handle a tool when you're wearing gloves. So I just thought I want to mention that. I can understand why they designed it like this. It is a really secure connection, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit annoying to have to do this, you know, IKEA inspired turn kind of annoying. But with that being said, I'm looking forward to the nighttime and I can start imaging with this. Okay, so I'm almost done setting up, but there are a few more things I want to talk about when it comes to setting up this iOptron CEM70, and these parts are supplied by iOptron themselves, so I feel like it's worth mentioning as part of the setup. So every mount needs a power supply, right? And a lot of times the mounts will not, the manufacturer will not supply you with a power supply or a power brick. You gotta buy your own. Luckily, a lot of these things are universal. You just need to figure out the voltage that you need and the size of the connectors that you need. However, despite iOptron being nice enough to supply you with a power brick, I have a big issue with this power brick. And that is because while the length from the power brick to the outlet is not a problem and is nice and long, I don't understand why the length from the power brick to the mount, it's really short. This is how long it is. And it's not detachable. Like, I cannot substitute this with another wire. And it's basically a little bit longer than the length of my arm. You can see why this is a problem, because you basically need to place your power brick really close to the mount. Otherwise, this is gonna pull on it, and I just don't like it. Now, the power supply attaches to the base of the mount, so even if there are any pull, it should not be a problem, but I just don't like the way that this was designed for the durability of the wire. I don't want it pulling down on the wire. Secondly, talk about the supply hand controller. There's nothing wrong with the hand controller. It works just fine. If you don't want to control your mount with a computer, a hand controller such as this one is more than sufficient. And it also attaches to the base of the mount. What's my issue here? There's nowhere on the mount or one of the iOptron tri-pier that I have that has a bracket to hold on to your hand controller. So if you need to use a hand controller, you have no choice but to sort of like try to slot it in between one of the legs of the tripod, or like, I don't know, like tape it onto the mount itself, or because otherwise your hand controller will just be dangling off. There's no attachment point for it, and there's no place for the hand controller to go. Luckily, by the time that you're using a mount like this, I'm hoping that you're already controlling with your computer. So this is an afterthought. But for those of you who do want to control the mount with just a simple hand controller, I don't understand the design choice for leaving out the secure way to just rest your hand controller. Anyways, I just thought I wanted to bring those up because I find these two decisions to be really odd. And like I said earlier, the power supply, well, if you don't like the power brick that iOptron supplied you with, you can use your own. I just thought I wanted to bring that up. Anyways, I'm gonna wait for nighttime and start imaging. How should I summarize the iOptron CEM70EC-NUC? And what I'm gonna say will apply to the entire range, even the base model. This is a mount for somebody who is looking for their second mount. And I'm only saying that because, first of all, this mount is very user-friendly. Don't get me wrong, it is super user-friendly, but 30 pounds of mass is still a lot to handle for anybody. So if you already have a mount and you're looking for a second sort of more permanent mount, oh, I would definitely recommend this. I would also recommend this to anybody who has a telescope that is either 4 inches in diameter or what is that in millimeters? 110 or 120 millimeters in diameter. If you have telescopes as large or you want to go larger than that, I would absolutely recommend this. And I say that because I think a lot of telescopes, a lot of mounts will get the job done. But I put this one as sort of a state of the art because it's able to implement a lot of the basic features that all mounts would have, and is able to implement them in a superior fashion. And why do I say that? Because just tonight, I was able to get some of the best polar alignment I've ever gotten. And that's all due to the fact that the physical input for this mount is so smooth and precise and accurate that I'm able to get some of the most accurate polar alignment. And with that comes with accurate auto guiding. Now, if you know me, you know that I never care about the RMS number or the chart. I care about what the final picture looks like. But I have to admit, when I see a chart like this from the city of San Francisco, being 2 blocks away from the Pacific Ocean, and who knows what that is doing to my night sky, 0.5 of arc second of error, it's pretty amazing. So with that being said, I cannot speak enough about this iOptron CEM70EC-NUC, and I want to thank once again to Agena Astro for sending this out to me. And I hope that, you know, if you're in a market for a mount like this, absolutely consider the iOptron. You won't regret it. And with that being said, I hope you guys will have good health, and I'll see you guys next time. Clear skies, everybody. Take care. Bye.